Hello there ladies and gentlemen, today I'm going to show you how you can make this awesome navigation menu just using HTML and CSS. Currently I'm running this project on codepen.io. The link of this project will be given in the description down below. Before starting the project, I would love to tell you that this entire project is scalable. By scalable, I mean that if you change the values of these variables over here, then the entire component would changes. Let's say that we are running this component on a desktop screen, which means that we have a larger screen to work with. So if we change the values over here, then the entire component changes. At the same time, if we are rendering this component on a mobile screen, then if we change over here, change the values over here, then it will adjust accordingly. Now the cool thing about writing CSS in this way is that if we want to change something, then we can change over here. Let's say that we want to change the font size. Okay, we want to change this font size, so we can change it over here. And if we don't write in this way, if we write CSS in the conventional way, then we have to physically read the whole document to find a single line of code to change the font size. But in this way we can change it over here. Okay, then first things first, we'll start with the HTML. As you can recall, document object model or DOM is the backbone of HTML, and the elements of DOM are represented in a tree structure. If you can recall, it looks something like this. If you search the term DOM, you will see that it is represented in a tree structure. So for the sake of this tutorial, I have represented the entire HTML in a DOM structure. Firstly, we will create a menu class. It will be our container or the parent element where we will have three children classes, namely the items first, label for checkbox, and items last. These three classes will be our children for the parent class named menu. Now back in the end result of our project, we will name these two as items first. These two will be our items last, and this will be the label for our checkbox. Let's start writing the HTML of our project. At first we will create a menu container, and then we will create an input type checkbox. We will name the input as menu active. The same name will be applied for the ID attribute. Then we will create a label for our input. At the for attribute, we will write the name of the input, menu active. Then inside the label, we will create the navigation menu icon. In order to create this navigation menu icon, let's say this box over here is named lines. Okay, and it is the parent container. And then inside the parent container, we have three lines. Okay, let's call it line 1. Okay, and this will be line 2, and this one will be line 3. So let's go and write the HTML. Okay, the lines class will be our parent container. Inside the parent container, we will create three childrens named line 1, line 2, and line 3. In our output section, we can see nothing but a small checkbox. Alright, so when we click this box, we can see a little tick sign. When we click it again, we can see that it's empty. Okay, so what's the main logic behind putting a checkbox? Okay, now back to our end project. I have used a checkbox over here. So when I click here, the state is checked. Okay, when I click it again, it's unchecked. So checked, unchecked, checked, unchecked. Now it's time to style our project. So let's go inside the CSS tab and click this gear icon and come here, click here and select the SCSS option. SCSS is a preprocessor. I highly discourage you from using plain CSS. Instead, you should use a preprocessor. Personally, I use SAS. SAS and CSS looks almost identical, but the main difference is SAS has more functionalities than CSS. As I explained to you the projects, I'll show you some examples. Don't worry about it, I'll show you. But first, we need to change the default style of our project. So hit star, curly braces, and we're gonna set the padding and margin to 0 pixels. Then we're gonna set the box sizing to be border box. One cool feature of SAS is that you can nest a block of code in another block of code. What I mean by that is, let's say that whatever is written inside the curly braces is a block of code, okay? So let's consider this as a block of code. Then we write another block of code, let's say it's body, okay? And then we can write anything we want inside over here. This is the system of CSS. And in SAS, what we can do is that we can take this entire block of code and keep it over here, and it will still work. So this is called nesting. Now inside the body, we will set the width to be 100%. And we will set the height to be 100 VH. VH means view height. Our next target is to place this checkbox at the center of our page. We can achieve this target in multiple ways, but I will show you the shortcut way. You write display grid. And then we write place item center. So we got our desired result. And then we're gonna change the background color to black. And we will change the font color to be white. Then we will change the font family to be sans serif. Now it's time to start styling the lines container over here. Now let's look at the classes line 1, line 2 and line 3. These 3 lines of code will receive similar styling properties. Instead of styling them one at a time, what we can do is style 3 of these classes all together just by writing a single block of code. Let me show you. Come over to this block of code and enter square brackets and write class. Then this sign equal to double quotes. Then write line hyphen and then curly braces. Okay, so what this block of code is doing is it searches the entire HTML document for a match. So we want this block of code to target 3 classes, line 1, line 2 and then line 3. So this block of code is grabbing those 3 classes and applying the styles whatever we are writing in this block of code to those classes. Don't worry about it if you don't understand it. Let me show you. Let's start building our menu icon. Come over here and here we will set the width and height. Let's say we are setting the width to be 100 pixels and let's give it a height of 20 pixels. Okay, on the screen we are seeing nothing. It's because we need to change the background color. Let's set the background color to be white. On the screen we can see a white colored block. Okay, so let's decrease the height. On the screen we can just see a single line, but we were expecting to see 3 lines. Okay, so what's happening over here? Actually 3 lines are created, but these 3 lines are stacked on top of one another. So if we want to see the 3 lines all together, then we have to give it a margin. Let's give it a margin of, let's say, 10 pixels, top and bottom, and to the left and right we will give it a margin of 0. On the screen we can see that we have 3 lines. Okay, so this is our line 1, line 2 and line 3. Okay, so this is called a label, and this is the label of this input. So when I click this label, the checkbox will get checked. See, checked, unchecked, checked, unchecked, checked, unchecked. We have created the checkbox. Okay, right now our goal is to create animation for our menu icon. So how can we animate the label of our menu icon? Let's come over here. If you can recall, the ID of our input is menu active. So on the CSS file we will select it by inputting hashtag menu active. Okay, and this state currently is unchecked. So when we check it, it will give us a animation. So over here we will give a colon sign and checked, and then we're gonna input this wavy line. Okay, this is called general sibling selector of CSS, and then we're gonna select label, then curly braces. So what I'm trying to achieve over here is, when our input with an ID menu active is checked, it's gonna target the label and do the changes according to the styles we have set in this code block. Okay, so we need to animate this container from these 3 lines to a cross. Okay, so let's select dot line 1 curly braces, dot line 2 curly braces, dot line 3 curly braces. Now come over to the line 1 class code block and write transform. Over here write translate y. Okay, so translate y. When we write translate y and give it a number pixels, let's say we have given it 100 pixels. Okay, what translate y does is it moves an item vertically from top to bottom. Okay, so when we set the value to be plus, it's gonna move an item to the top, and when the value is set to minus, it's gonna take that item to the bottom. Okay, translate x does the same thing. It takes an item and moves it horizontally to the left and right. Okay, when the value is plus, it's gonna go to the right. When the value is minus, it's gonna go to the left. And then let's come over to the output section and see a result. See the result. When we click the icon, we can see that it moves at the bottom. Okay, it just snaps. Okay, let's see, checked, unchecked, checked, unchecked. But we don't need this snappy thing. We need it to give us a smooth animation. How can we achieve this? In order to achieve this, come over to this line, this code block, and over here write transition all 1s is. Now let's see the result. When I click it here, we can see a smooth animation happening. When I click it again, there's our smooth animation. Okay, so how can we create a cross? But before creating a cross, we should keep our code neat and clean, because as our code grows larger and larger, it will be very difficult for us to manage the entire project. In SAS, there are multiple ways to manage our project and keep our code neat and clean. For the sake of this tutorial, I'm gonna show you how you can use SAS variables to manage an entire project. Let's look at our code over here. When we put the value of the width and height over here, and then when we need to change the value, then what happens is we have to physically search through the entire document. But instead of doing this hard work, we can do it in the easy way. We can come at the top of our page, and here we can set variables. SAS gives us opportunities to create variables. We can write $width. Okay, and then set it to 100 pixels. And $height, let's say it's 20 pixels. Okay, so we're gonna set the width over here, $width, and the height over here. Previously there was 10 pixels and I have set it to 20 pixels. On the output section we can see that it is working. Okay, we can do the same thing for the margin. We will also create a variable for the timing function. Let's say that our application has grown to tens of thousands of codes. So in this sea of code, it will be very hard for a developer to find and replace one line of code. So you can adopt this practice by putting all the changeable values at the top. Here, let me give you an example. The timing function is set to 1 seconds. So when I click here, it takes 1 second. But if I change the value to 5 seconds, we can see the output over here. See, it became much more slower. It is actually taking 5 seconds. So in order to create the cross, we need line 1 and line 3. We don't need the line 2. We don't need the class line 2. So what we can do is make it go disappear. So come over to this code block and write transform scale 0. Transform scale 0. Come over to the output section, and when we click this, we can see that line 2 disappears on checked state. Now we can work with line 1 and line 3. What we will do is bring the line 1 at the center and the line 3 at the center. Then we're gonna rotate it to look like a cross. Okay, so we are gonna set positive value for the translate y of line 1 and it will receive a negative value. And at the middle we can see that there is a gap. Okay, this gap is formed of margin and height of line 2. Okay, so in order to bring these two, we need to work with the margin and the height. Let me show you. On the translate y, we're gonna set to height, $height. Okay, let's see an output. Okay, so we can see that it's coming down but not at the center. Okay, it's because there is margin, so we need to add the margin. You can see that line 1 is replacing line 2. We will write the same code for line 3, but it will be negative. Okay, negative. Let's see the output. Did you see? We achieved what we were expecting. Okay, and then what we are gonna do is we're gonna rotate it to 45 degrees. So come over here and write rotate 45 degrees. Same goes for here, minus 45 degrees. On the output section, we can see a nice cross. We don't need this checkbox anymore. What we can do is write this line of code. Input, then square brackets, and write type equal to checkbox, curly braces, and write D none or display none. You can see the checkbox is gone and still it works. It's a best practice to write comments on top of a code block so that we can understand what this code block is doing. So let's write comment for this block of code. This is the hamburger menu toggle on and off. This is the comment for this code block. Okay, we can minimize this entire code block by pressing this little icon over here. See it? Did you see it got minimized? And instead of keeping this code block over here, we can take it inside the body section. So hit Ctrl X and then Ctrl V over here. And over this code block, write styling for dot lines class. Congratulations, we're half done. In order to complete the remaining half of our project, we need to use display flex and its properties multiple times. But instead of writing these properties multiple times, what we can do is we can create a template and then we can include the template whenever we want. So in SAS, we can create something called mixins. So mixins are template. Let's create a mixin for ourselves. In order to create a mixin, input @mixin. Okay, we're gonna name this mixin as flex. Then input brackets and then curly braces. Okay, we're gonna write over here d flex, or if we press tab, it's gonna give us display flex. Okay, we're gonna set the flex direction. Now we have two scenarios. In one scenario, we need the flex direction to be column, and on the other scenario, we want the flex direction to be row. So we have two options. So instead of writing directly here, so instead of writing row or column directly here, what we can do is we can give it an argument of, let's say let's name it just. Let's name it dir. Okay, and set the argument over here, dir. Then we're gonna set justify content. Okay, it could be on the center, it could be on the left, it could be on the right. So instead of giving value over here directly, we're gonna set an argument. Okay, let's call it just. Then we're gonna have align items. Same rule applies for align items. We're gonna give it an argument. Let's call it ali. ali. And voila, we have created a template for ourselves. Now in order to use this template, what we have to do is we're gonna do something like this. We're gonna input @ then include, and then we're gonna write flex. Okay, and then we're gonna give brackets, and over here we're gonna give the arguments. So let's say that let's see over here, the first argument is direction, flex direction. So if we want the flex direction to be row, we will write here row. But if we don't want row, we can write here columns. And then we have justify content. There are several options over here, but let's say we want the content to be on the center. Justify content works on the x-axis and align items works on the y-axis. So we can use justify content to move an item within the x-axis, and we can use the align items to move an item within the y-axis. Okay, let's say that we want the justify content to be on the center, so we're gonna write center. And we don't want, let's say, and let's say that we don't want the align items property, so we can write null. So it's not gonna work. Okay, so this is how you can use a template mixin inside the SAS. Let's put a comment over here. Now let's put a comment over here. Template for the CSS Flexbox model, and then we're gonna write a comment over here. Here I have written, these are the configuration variables. Change these according to the display sizes or to your needs. Sounds simple enough. On the output section, observe a little closely. When I put the mouse on the menu icon, we can see that it is a pointer. The mouse is a pointer. So if we want to change the mouse icon when we hover over here, we can change it over here. Come over to this code block, and over here we're gonna write cursor pointer. Now let's see the result. We can see that we're getting a finger. Okay, so this is our mouse icon over here, and when we hover over it, we're gonna get a finger. So far so good. Now let's start building the remaining part of our project. Come over to the HTML and write items tab, and here we're gonna write I1 and I2, which represents home and about. And we're gonna write the same thing over here, and we're gonna change to services and contact. And then we're gonna give here a number 1, 2, 3, 4. You can notice that this div and this div has the same class name. In order to differentiate them, we're gonna write over here first, and then we're gonna name here last. In our output section, we can see that it behaves in a column. But we don't need this. We need it to behave like a row. So in order to achieve this, come over to the CSS. And we can minimize this by clicking this little icon over here. So let's minimize it. The same goes here and here. So let's write dot menu. And here we're gonna use a mixin @include. Okay. Flex, include flex. Then we're gonna give it values. We want it to behave like a row, so we're gonna put here row null null. Let's see the output. It's already in a row. Now we need this to be in a row too, so we're gonna write over here dot items. We're gonna set the same value over here. You can notice that it looks much better than before. And then we want these items to be at the center. Okay, so come over here and change the values to center and center. See, it came to the center. And then we're gonna set some margin between these two items. Okay, so come over here and write square brackets class $sign equal to I hyphen. Okay, then curly braces. We're gonna write here margin. We want the margin on the top and bottom to be 0, so we're gonna give here 0 and then $sign margin. Okay, I'm using this value from here. Okay, so it already looks a lot better and nicer. Come over here again and write cursor pointer. So let's see the result. See, it's hovering. Now let's give our text some font size and font weight. Instead of giving the font size directly over here, we're gonna use a variable $. Let's name it font size. Okay, we're gonna set here font size. Let's say we're gonna give it 18 pixels. Our next target is to show these when we click over here. Okay, so let's do this. Here I'm gonna write transition all $, time, which is 1 second, and is. Next, I'm gonna write here the first and last class. And then I'm gonna write here transform translate x. Okay, so I want this to hide inside here. So this is the x-axis. Translate x, then 100 pixels. See, it's going inside over here. Now let's give it a z index. On the items, I'm gonna give a z index value of 0 because I want it to be at the bottom of our menu icon. So that index 0, and I want the menu icon to be on the top. So I'm gonna give it a z index of 1. Let's come over here to the dot first code block, and we're gonna give it an opacity of 0. We're gonna write the same thing over here on the last class name. I'm gonna give a value of -100 pixels. Now in our output section, we can notice that it doesn't work anymore. In order to make it work, we also need to change the label to display flex. So come over here and write label flex row no. Now it's working again. So our next target is to bring the items over here and here when we check this. Okay, so how can we do this? Let's come to our CSS, and at the bottom let's write hashtag menu active. If you can recall, it's the name of our label. Then colon checked curly braces, and here we're gonna write and the general sibling selector and dot first. Okay, and then we're gonna write here and this selector and dot last. What this code block is doing is that when our menu active, which means the label, or you can also say it, the input checkbox is checked, it's gonna target the first class and the last class and then execute whatever code is written inside over here. So over here we have written the translate x to be 100 pixels and opacity 0. In here we're gonna set it to default. To copy this code block, Control C, Control V. Here we're gonna set it to 0, and here 1. We'll do the same thing over here. As you can notice that half of it is working. Items last is working, but items first is not working. So what may be the reason? What may be the reason behind this? Let me show you. Come over to the HTML. Okay, so we are seeing that the input type checkbox is over here. Okay, and we have used a general sibling selector. So when we use a general sibling selector, which means that it will select just this one, just below the one, but it will not select whatever is written before, whatever is before the target. It will not select this, it will select only this. So how can we solve this problem? In order to solve this problem, we're gonna write this input type checkbox at the top like this. Now we can see the result. It's working perfectly fine. Now let's give here a little hover effect. Okay, so when we hover over here, we're gonna get a color change. Okay, so how can we do this? Let's come over to the CSS, and at the top inside our body, we're gonna change color over here. So I'm giving this color over here. We can see our results. So when I hover over here, I want the color white to show. So come at this code block over here, okay, and right and colon hover, color white. So we can see the output. See, it's happening really fast. So if we want to change the timing function of the transition property over here, then we can set transition over here and set a time. Transition all 0.5s is. Now let's see. It will take 0.5 seconds. Okay, so the animation time, the transition time has slowed a little bit. See? Alright. I got the color from colors.co. I'm gonna give a link at the top as a comment, okay, so that you can go and visit the link. So we're done. Let's write comments, okay. This is the transition of menu items on and off, and over here write configuring the initial position of .first and .last class, I mean the menu items. And then over here I'm gonna write styling of the .items class includes both the first and last classes, which means that this code block is targeting I1, I2, I3, I4. As you can recall, I1 is home, about, I2, I3 and I4, and this one is items, and this is items class. So this single code block is targeting both the items div over here, this one and this one. Come over here and give a comment over here. Styling the configuration for the .menu class. This is the main container that holds the three sections, the items first, label, and items last. And over here let's write styling rules for the checkbox label. So we are done with the project. Let's change the values. Come over here and give the width a value of let's say 60 pixels and a height of 8 pixels, and let's set the time to 0.6. okay, let's see the result. It looks really nice.
Congratulations, we're done with our project. If you like the video, then give a like, share it with a homie, and feel free to subscribe. I post videos on practical web dev projects so that you can level up. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.